In this video, I'm going to have some fun with Excel and build a basic Keno simulator. Along the way, you'll learn some awesome and easy to use Excel skills in a fun way. The Keno board will be 10 squares wide by 8 squares high. Each square will be made up of 2 cells. One for the heading, which will show the square number as well as highlight the cell in a different color if it is one of the numbers picked by the player. The second cell will show the numbers drawn as well as be used for some calculations. I'll start by highlighting 10 columns and adjusting the column width to 12. Now for the rows. I'm fine with the row height of the first row as it will only contain the number of the square. However, I'd like to make sure the height of the heading cell and the cell below it combined end up close to being a square. Although, we don't have to be perfect. I'll do a little bit of tinkering with the height of the second cell until it looks roughly square. Right-clicking the row and checking the row height. I see that it's 37.5. I can use this size to repeat the row heights for the remaining 7 rows. Of course, this will be every second row, because the heading cells don't need the row height adjustments. I can highlight every second row by holding the Control button for each row I select. Then, I can right-click and specify the row height for all of the rows in one shot. Now, I am going to add a cell fill color so that I can see the Keno board. I'll do this by highlighting the game area and changing the fill color. Let's go with blue. I want to put a white border around each square in our Keno game. I'll open up the border drop-down menu and select more borders. For the style, I'll choose one of the thicker lines. Then, for the color, I'll choose white. Finally, I'll choose outline border and our first square is done. Instead of having to repeat that process for each square, I can use the Format Painter function to copy that border style to the remaining squares of our Keno play area. The next thing I need to do is to add the number label for each square. I'll begin in the first cell with a 1, and then a 2 in the next one. Before I go any further, I want to make sure my headings are centered and white in color and the font weight bold. So, I'll highlight the first 2. Change the font color to white. Choose bold for the font weight. And center align the cells. I can then drag the autofill handle to complete the remaining headings for the row. I'll repeat this process for the remaining rows. Alright, we now have the Keno gameplay area laid out. For this rather basic version of a Keno game, I'll have the player select 7 numbers. On the right, I'll make a table where the player can pick their lucky numbers. I'll begin by creating a heading or label for each pick from 1 to 7. To quickly add font styling, borders and cell fill, I'll highlight one of the squares from our game board and use the Format Painter to apply it to the player picks area. However, my plan is to have any number that the player selects, change the heading color of that number on the Keno play area to purple. So, to make things a little more intuitive, I'm going to change the heading colors of the player's picks area to purple. Now, I want to change the font size of the area where the player enters their picks. I'll add a number in the Pick 1 area as a reference. Alright, it's small and black in color, that's not going to work. I'll highlight the cell and select the vertical and horizontal center alignment. Then a font color of white. And then bold. I'll adjust the font size until it stands out more. 24 seems to look pretty good. I'll speed things up as I copy the styling to the remaining cells. Alright, I'll clear out the player entered picks area now that the font styling has been modified. Okay, now let's add some functionality. I want to have any value between 1 and 80 that the player enters as their picks. Highlight the corresponding square heading on the gameplay area. To do this, I will use conditional formatting to set up a rule. But first, I am going to need to highlight all of our headings in the gameplay area because they also contain the numbers that we are looking for matches to in the player's picks. The easiest way is to hold the control button as you select all of the headings. To make things easier going forward, I'm going to name this range of values as Gameplay Headings. On the Home tab, I'll click on the Conditional Formatting button. From the drop-down menu, I'll click on New Rule. When it comes to selecting a rule type, I'll choose the second one, Format only cells that contain. In the Edit the Rule Description area, I want a cell value that is equal to. And in this case it will be the player's first pick. Remember, it has to be an absolute reference, so instead of simply entering in cell M3, we'll add a $sign before the M and before the 3. Next, click on the Format button so we can change the color of the cell to purple. I'll make sure I'm in the Fill tab, and then choose the purple color and click OK. Then click OK once again and the rule should be in place. Let's test it out. I'll put a number in the Pick 1 area and see what happens. I'll try 66. Look at that, the heading for square number 66 is purple. Now, if I delete the value in the Pick 1 area, the heading in square 66 is back to being blue. I can try a few more numbers and the conditional formatting rule is working great. For the remaining 6 picks, I am going to duplicate the rule 6 times and change the equals value to the cell of the player's pick. There are other ways to do this, but to keep this tutorial simple for anyone to do, I'll go with this method. So, for the second one, I'll choose my named range of cells from the drop-down list, and then I'll go back into conditional formatting and choose New Rule. And do the same thing I did previously. Once again, I'll speed things up so you don't have to watch me do the same thing over and over again. The worksheet is now set up to change the heading color of the squares picked by the player. The next step of this tutorial is to set up the random draw of 20 numbers that we hope the player's picks will match. What I'm going to do is to assign a random value between 0 and 1 for all of the numbers from 1 to 80, the numbers of each of the squares. Then, I'll rank the top 20 random values and their associated Keno board square numbers. This will give us a list of 20 random numbers. Below the gameplay area, I'm going to put the values of 1 to 80, with each number on its own row. Once I'm done, I'm going to add the following formula to the cell to the left of number 1. Equals rand, followed by an opening and a closing bracket, and then click Enter. This gives us a random value between 0 and 1. I'll copy the formula to the remaining rows. I can refresh the random numbers by clicking the Shift and the F9 button. To make things easier going forward, I'm going to highlight the random numbers and the Keno square associated with each one and create a name for the range. I'll call this Keno Draw by entering it in the field to the left of the formula bar. I also want to create a named range for just the random values. I'll highlight the random values in column B. Then I'll name this range of values, random numbers. Now, for the random draw of 20 numbers to use on the Keno board. I'm going to use the large function to pick the largest 20 random values, and then I'll correspond those numbers to the Keno square number that is in column C. The large function is as follows. Equals large, followed by an opening bracket. We see the formula tooltip, and the first item is the array. For this example, it's the list of 80 random numbers. Since I've already named this range of values, I can enter it by name here, random numbers. Then, I'll add a comma. After the comma, it's looking for a k value. For this example, I want the largest 20 values. So, conveniently enough, next to the random numbers are the Keno square numbers. So, I can use C23 because it is a 1 and would be the largest value. Add a closing bracket and click enter, and the largest random value is showing. For the next row, the k value would be 2, or the second largest value, and so on. I'll copy the first formula 19 more times so that I have a list of the 20 largest random values. The next step is that I need to associate those random values with the Keno square number that was beside them in column C. To do this, I'll use a VLOOKUP function. For the first one, the formula would be equals VLOOKUP followed by an opening bracket. Once again, we see a formula tooltip that helps us with the formula. The first item is the lookup value. In this case, it's the random value in column E. I'll click on the cell and then add a comma. The next item required is the table array. In this case, it's the values in columns B and C. However, I earlier named the range to make things easier, so I didn't have to highlight the entire range. The range was named Keno Draw, so I'll enter it here and then add another comma. Next is the column index number. This is where we want to look to find a match to the random value in column E. In this instance, it would be the second column, the values in column C. I'll add another comma and on to our last value. This is the range lookup. The only two values are true or false. Oddly enough, false means an exact match, and that's what I want. I'll enter false. Add a closing bracket and click enter. The actual Keno square value is now displayed. I'll copy the formula to the remaining 19 rows, and we now have the 20 drawn numbers in our Keno game. As mentioned before, I can refresh the random numbers by clicking the Shift and the F9 button. Once again, to make things easier on us as we progress, I'm going to name this range of 20 winning numbers. I'll give this range the creative name, winning numbers. Now, the next step is to plot the 20 drawn numbers on our Keno board. To keep things simple, for all 20 drawn numbers, I want to change the color of the corresponding cell below the headings to a green color. For each cell, I'm going to check if its heading value matches any one of the numbers drawn. If the number does not match, I'm going to write the value, no, in the cell. If the number matches one of the drawn numbers, I'm going to write the value, yes, in the cell. Once that is done, I can create conditional formatting rules to change the fill and font colors of the cell as well as the words, yes and no, so that they aren't seen if there is, or is not a match. I could simply change the cell color if there was a match, but adding the yes or no value will help further on as I determine how many correct matches I had and a corresponding fictional payout. Let's begin with square one. Here's the formula I'm going to use in every cell below the headings. Equals if followed by an opening bracket. Next, I'll use the COUNTIF function followed by an opening bracket. The first element required is the range. In this case, it's the list of winning numbers that we named, winning numbers. Then I'll add a comma. The next value required is what we are looking to match. In this case, it's the cell above it that contains the square number, cell B2. I'll add a closing bracket and then a comma to continue the if function. The first value is what is displayed if there is a match. So, I'll enter yes between quotes. Then it's the value if it's not a match, which is no within quotes. Add a closing bracket and click enter. I have now set up square 1 to check if it matches any of the drawn numbers. I'll refresh a few times. There we go, there's a yes showing. And, looking down, I can see that indeed, a 1 was drawn. I will now copy that formula to the other squares. Next, I'm going to highlight all of the cells below the headings and name them as arranged. I'll creatively call this range squares. Now, I'm going to apply conditional formatting to the no's and yeses. If there is a no, I want the text and the fill to be blue to match the background of the square so it is not seen. If there is a match, or yes, I want the text and fill to be green to indicate that this square was drawn. Let's begin with the yeses. I'll call up the range called squares and then click on conditional formatting. I will then click on New Rule and choose Format Only Cells that contain. I'll change the Format Only Cells with value to equal to. And in the last field, I'll enter equals and the word yes within quotes. Next, I'll click on the Format button to assign the font and cell color. On the Font tab, I'll change the color to green. And then on the Fill tab, I'll select the same color of green. I'll click OK and then click OK once again. As soon as I do, I can now see all the cells that were drawn colored in green and I no longer see the word yes. I'll use Shift plus F9 again to refresh the page a few times and we can see that the green squares change. Alright, now on to the no's. Once again, I'll pull up the squares range of cells. Go to Conditional Formatting and choose New Rule. I'll select Format Only Cells that contain and change the Format Only Cells with value to equal to. In the next field, I'll add equals, then the word no within quotes. Next click Format. On the Font tab, I'll change the color to the same blue as the squares. I'll click OK twice. And now we no longer see the no's in our squares. Once again, I'll play with Shift and F9 to run a number of draws. And now to add a bit more logic to our Keno simulator. I want to count how many matches the player's 7 numbers have with the 20 drawn numbers and then apply a winning value to them. For each of the player's picks, I want to check to see if it matched any of the drawn numbers. I'll use a similar version of the formula that I used to apply a yes or no value to each square earlier. For pick 1, the formula would be equals. Then if, followed by an opening bracket. Next, the COUNTIF function followed by another opening bracket. The required value is the range. In this case it's the drawn numbers which we called the winning numbers. Next is a comma followed by the value we want to check against. In this case, it's the player's first pick in cell M3. Don't forget it needs to be an absolute value with $signs in front of the M and the 3. Next is a closing bracket to close off the COUNTIF function. To continue the if function, I'll add a comma followed by the word yes in quotes because it would be a match. Then a comma with the word no within quotes if it wasn't a match. Finally, a closing bracket and click enter. I'll copy the formula to the next 6 rows. However, I need to make sure to change the player pick. In the second row, the value would be the absolute value of M5 and so on for the remaining rows. Now that I've done all 7 versions of the formula, I want to count how many matches, or yes values I have. However, before I can do that, I need to enter 7 picks so we have something to check against. Otherwise, it would be pretty depressing seeing 0 matches every time. The formula would be equals followed by count if and then an opening bracket. The first value would be the range. In this case, it would be values in column H. Next is a comma and the value we want to count. This would be the word yes within quotes. Add a closing bracket and click enter. Using Shift and the F9 key to redraw numbers, you can see the number of yes values changes. I'm going to speed things up as I add a table next to the player picks to show the results. For the results field, I simply have to pull the value in column I-23 that shows how many matches the player had. I'll use the following formula. Equals. Then the value in I-23 followed by an ampersand. Then quotes, a space and \7. Then closing quotes and click enter. Now, it will show us how many matches we had out of 7 every time we run a new draw by using Shift and F9. As you can see, I've also added the pay table for what the winnings would be for the number of matches the player had. Since there are only a small number of options, I'm going to use a nested if statement. This is a super long one, so I'll show it on the screen and explain what I'm doing. For each portion of the if statement, I'm going to check how many matches there are from cell I-23 and then assign a corresponding value from the pay table. The first one is if the value is less than 3. If that's the case, the winnings are 0. The second one would be if the value is equal to 3, that would make the winnings $1. The structure of the formula is the same all the way to if the number of matches is 7, the winnings would be $5,000. Let's format the result into currency format. I'll do a few more adjustments to make our Keno simulator look a little cleaner. Let's run some draws and see how much we can win. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you so much for hanging in there with me. If you like these fun ways to learn Excel, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe. If you want more, check out the Powerball lottery number generator video or the how to create a slot machine in Excel videos. Thanks for watching and have an excellent day.